Let's see what the audio does in this one. Okay. Let's see what the audio is like in this one. All right. So I think YouTube is screwing with the audio. Got to let everybody know that the stream is going on, but I'm going to get started in a minute. I'm sorry about all the technical difficulties, but I'm going to get started in a minute. Thank you, guys. Okay. Okay, welcome to tonight's live stream. I've already let everybody on Twitter and Facebook know what's going on. And before I get started, I'm going to thank Bowen for the donation to the PayPal. And if you guys want to donate to the Cash App, you can donate to the Cash App by clicking the link in the chat. And I'm going to get started. Now, this Wednesday, we saw a mob storm the Capitol building in Washington, and many people were caught off guard. And I wasn't really caught off guard. I was practically indifferent to it because I had seen it coming years ago. And the reason why I can say I saw it coming years ago is because all of this, when you really think about it, really started to build momentum the day your Attorney General, Eric Holder, decided not to file federal civil rights charges against George Zimmerman. Once your Attorney General, Eric Holder, decided not to file federal civil rights charges against George Zimmerman, that started the ball rolling towards what we saw in Washington on Wednesday. Because when your Attorney General, Eric Holder, decided not to file those federal civil rights charges and put that line in the sand as related to the civil rights of Black people, it put all of America at risk of these white supremacists. Because once those white supremacists saw that there was no boundary going to be established for Black people's civil rights, that's the thing that emboldened them to continue participating in their behavior. Now, these white supremacists, they got that emboldenment, again, from the Obama administration's total apathy towards Black people. And the fact that they didn't value Black life gave them all the encouragement to go and motivation to go out here and further push their white supremacist cause. Because the Obama administration didn't stop George Zimmerman, and then George Zimmerman went on to go out here and he was signing candy wrappers from Skittles and he was signing Arizona iced teas. And as this was going on, your Donald Trump was out here not only challenging Barack Obama's legitimacy as an American citizen, but he was also laying the foundation for his platform for a political campaign, because your Donald Trump really would not have come to any sort of power had your Barack Obama came out here and set that line in the sand as related to Donald Trump, not only not Donald Trump, but George Zimmerman and these white racists who were supporting him. But when they saw that no one was going to stop them, what happened was these racists felt more and more emboldened, and they continued to build momentum. And sadly, many on the left that were so disconnected from the American people and protecting the American people's civil rights that they allowed these guys to continue to build more and more momentum, not understanding that the country never really recovered from the Great Recession, and many Americans were really still suffering as a result of the Great Recession. Many of the people on the left were sitting there thinking, oh, everything's okay because their people were fine, but they didn't understand that these racists were out here using the Great Recession as a way to continue building that momentum. And as the people on the Obama presidency and the left were patting themselves on the back, the people on the far right were developing their platform around your Donald Trump. And this is what caught a lot of people off guard in 2016, but I saw it coming as far back as 2012, because again, when the first building block of all of what happened in Washington in 2021 started with attorney Eric Holder deciding not to prosecute George Zimmerman, and that caused many dominoes to fall. And many people were not taking those dominoes seriously because these things were happening to Black people. I mean, they decided not to prosecute as related to Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, and your Eric Garner. And they practically ran the clock out on Eric Garner. And what they were doing was allowing these white supremacists and race soldiers to believe that there was no boundary as related to their continuing out of pocket and out of control behavior. And because they felt they could get away with the murder of Blacks, that's what led to them continuing to push forward. And when they saw that they could get Donald Trump nominated to be the president, and then they saw that they could get that nomination, they further continued to get more and more momentum. And then with the help of white females, they were able to secure the presidency. Now, that's another thing many people aren't really thinking about as related to Donald Trump. Many people with Hillary Clinton, they got caught up in the idea that because America was 51% women, that women would automatically go out here and support Hillary Clinton. They thought, okay, Hillary Clinton was going to easily beat Donald Trump, the so-called racist and bigot, and they thought they could run on that, again, not understanding that many of these white Americans, they were already frustrated by the fact that the Great Recession never really restored them back to their high social status, one, and two, many of these white Americans felt like they were not going to be able to get that privilege and high social status that they had before. And that's why the whole Make America Great Again slogan really made them interested and made them eager, because they were not just fighting as related to just their white skin, they were also fighting for their lifestyle, because white supremacy is supposed to guarantee white men and white women a certain lifestyle. And most of those people, they wanted to have that great lifestyle that put them above your African Americans, above your immigrants. They were fighting for that lifestyle because that lifestyle is what makes them white. So that's something that a lot of these people on the left really weren't thinking about as related to why Donald Trump is so popular with white Americans and even some minorities, is the fact that he is talking about that great lifestyle that they want, that white privilege that they want. And that's why he is still so popular with them, because he represents that lifestyle. And the fact that he's a celebrity who is popular, that's also what makes him extremely attractive to a lot of these white racists, because those white racists, they want that lifestyle. They see themselves losing a chance at the American dream, and that's the thing that they want. And they want it on the they want to create their smooth world like the one that they idealize as related to the 1950s, a world where your white male and your white female were elevated to the highest status, and your blacks and your minorities are at the bottom of the world. And it took a lot of people off guard that Trump won the election. But again, I saw this coming because I saw a left party that had taken its own constituents for granted and practically alienated black voters by not doing something about George Zimmerman. That disillusioned a large contingent of black voters and made them stay home. And that's why they lost in 2016. And that's why so many are shocked about losing in 2016. They thought they had it in the bag, but the whole thing is the American population is already, frustrated and tired, and those frustrations continue to mount over the last 4 years of the Obama presidency, and they were still mounting over the course of the Trump presidency. And this was building momentum for a good 8 years, and this was becoming more and more of a powder keg as the COVID-19 pandemic was going on. And many of these white racists, again, they're fearing losing their smooth world. They're fearing losing the American dream. And the whole thing has got them really frustrated. And like I talked about in my classic, now prophetic video, America on the Brink, I talked about how this country was practically on the brink because the whole flatten the curve theory proposed by your scientists like Dr. Fauci has flatlined the economy. And when you flatline the economy, you actually exacerbate the problems that have been going on with America's economy since 2008. And with half the country laid off, we had a powder keg getting ready to explode. And we started to see that powder keg ignite with the murder of George Floyd. Again, black people were the canary in the coal mine as related to what was going on. And the murder of George Floyd really set people off. And it not only set off people on the left like Black Lives Matter, but it also set off people on the far right, like those who stormed the Capitol building. Because many of those people who were frustrated, they saw that murder of George Floyd as a threat to their rights, and they thought that the government was further pushing against their rights. Now, even before the murder of George Floyd, we started to see things really start to flare up when your Gretchen Whitmer was trying to clamp down further restrictions on people as related to the pandemic in April. And this set off what I think is one of the greatest moments in foreshadowing as related to what we saw in the Capitol building. Because if you look at the incident as related to Gretchen Whitmer and those guys who stormed the State House in Michigan, that was a precursor to much of what we saw happen on Wednesday, because that's when we started to see those frustrations of those white supremacists flare up. And they decided to go to that Capitol building because your Whitmer, as she was thinking that she could continue to push more and more restrictions by telling people they couldn't go to visit their own families, telling them they couldn't buy seeds or even candy from a Target. She thought that, oh, she's keeping people safe. But what she didn't understand was she was agitating many of these people on the far right. And many of these people on the far right thought that their rights were being infringed. And many of those people on the far right, that's what incensed them to go down to that state house and go there with firearms and get in the face of law enforcement. And that's where we started to see, again, the first real spark in things. And then we saw the murder of George Floyd, and we saw the first flare up as related to things really starting to decline in this country. Because if you really look at the timeline and you look at the pattern, that was the first thing that triggered many of these racist and white supremacists that we saw. That was the first incident, but many people will see it as what happened with Whitmer as an isolated incident. But when I connect the dots, I see a timeline as related to things, because more and more Americans, as they were losing their jobs, their money was running low, and many people were struggling, we really started to see the whole situation deteriorate here in America. And things were getting bad because many people, again, they were already struggling as related to their bills. They were struggling as related to their unemployment. And this was just continuing to deteriorate. And as things got worse with the George Floyd riots, we got some empty symbolism from corporate America. We got some empty symbolism from many of these politicians. And they that's when they started to relent and started to open up the economy a little bit, because they saw how hot things were getting, and they were headed towards that nothing to lose moment. But they didn't really understand, again, how dire things were, because after they opened the economy, then we started to see what happened was there was gridlock in the House and the Senate as related to a second stimulus. And then they just practically disappeared. That's when Congress practically walked out on we the people, and they let this whole situation really start to deteriorate, because most of the American people, they practically were out here with no jobs, no money, and no way of paying their bills. And this happened for 4 months. And again, adding more and more fuel to the fire. Now, this fire was burning and burning for a long time. And your politicians on both sides let this fire burn, not understanding what was going on as related to the far right. Because on the far right, these people were again, talking about conspiracy theories and all this other stuff. And they were also simmering and boiling in anger. And that anger was erupting and flaring up after the election of Joe Biden. And that's when the conspiracy theories started to escalate as related to the election. And then you had your Donald Trump talking about a lot of different conspiracy theories as related to the election, talking about the election was fixed. And that was adding more and more fuel to the fire and causing a further and further rift between the American people and themselves, because we had people on the left and we had people on the right, and we had started to see more and more people becoming more and more divided as we started getting more conspiracy theories about Dominion voting machines, and we started getting more and more conspiracy theories from Donald Trump and his followers. And this was, again, adding fuel to the fire that was already burning very, very brightly and very large, because we had a lot of Americans still out of work. We had many areas locking down again. And a lot of people were on this brink that I had talked about in my classic video. And many of these people felt like they had nothing to lose. And when you have, like I talked about before, when you have people at a state of nothing to lose, that's when they become extremely dangerous. And more of these people on the far right felt like they had nothing to lose because at every turn that Trump was going out here to try to challenge the election, he was losing. And when they saw that the Congress was about to certify this election, that's when they lost it. And that's when we started to see all of that anger that had been simmering and boiling in this country for the last 8 to 10 years finally start to explode into the rage that, like I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. And if you want to check that book out, you can check that book out on Amazon because it's a book that really will break down much of the confusion that I saw in Washington. Because what you saw in Washington on Wednesday is what I talked about in the Man Crisis as related to the beta male. The beta male, when he is in it, has to deal with reality. What happens is he winds up, after years of simmering and boiling in anger, he eventually winds up exploding in a rage. And when it comes down to many of these white supremacists and these white nationalists and these people on the far right, oftentimes these people, they live in a rose-colored world. And that rose-colored world is, again, one that is supported by white supremacy that tells many of these white racists that their place in the world is meant to be a certain standard. It tells them that they are entitled to live a certain lifestyle, and they are entitled to be able to treat people a certain way, and they are allowed to be in a first-class status. That's what white supremacy guarantees most of these white people. And these people, they not only believe they're fighting for Donald Trump, they're also fighting for that lifestyle and those privileges that are supposed to be guaranteed to them under the unwritten social rules of white supremacy. So many of those people, they have to deal with a reality where people are saying no to them for the first time. And this is something they can't really cope with. And this is something they can't deal with. And this is why they're having what I would call a complete meltdown, because many of these beta white males and even some of these beta white females, they are not able to deal with the reality as related to people telling them that they cannot go and do what they want as related to COVID-19 restrictions, one, and two, their candidate lost an election. And because they're hearing no for the first time, this is what's causing many of these white people to practically lose it, because somebody actually told white people no, and they're not used to hearing the word no from anyone. When you really think about this country and you really think about what's gone on for the last 8 years, how we've watched people like George Zimmerman actually get told that they can get away with murdering black people, like kids like Trayvon Martin, because Trayvon Martin was a child. They're taught that they can, okay, you can get a pass for murdering Tamir Rice. You can get a pass for murdering Alton Sterling. You can get a pass for murdering Philando Castile. You can get a pass for murdering Jordan Davis. You can get passes for murdering as many black people as you want. And they have had these boundaries where they have no boundaries. And for the first time, somebody is starting to say no to them. This is what's got a lot of these people upset because they've never been told no. I mean, if you look at most white Americans, they have never really been told no. I mean, they've been going on for years because they are used to having their way in this country. They're used to having their way as related to the world, and they can't really cope with somebody actually telling them no in life. I mean, look at all of these Karens out here. These Karens are a direct result of parents never setting boundaries, never a father telling a girl no. And these women are acting out because they have never had to deal with reality. And now that they have to deal with reality, they just can't handle it. And just like I talk about in the man crisis, your beta male, when he has to deal with reality, this is what makes him explode in rage. And when he explodes in rage, what happens is he starts to participate in a spectrum of violent behaviors. Because when your beta male gets told no or has to deal with the reality of things not working the way he wants, that's when he loses it. And a lot of these white males and white females, they can't deal with that reality that their candidate lost. And it's similar to what we saw in 2016 when Hillary Clinton lost. I mean, if we really look from a panoramic and objective perspective, we saw a similar kind of meltdown as related to many on the left. I mean, when Donald Trump won, we saw people having meltdowns in the middle of the street and screaming in the street. And that was on the left in 2016. And in 2020, we saw the same thing. I mean, not after the election. That's when we started to see the simmering and boiling of anger with the conspiracy theories that were egged on by your Donald Trump. And then we saw, as this was going on, these conspiracy theories continuing to be escalated. Then we started to see the boiling of anger. And then eventually we saw the explosion of rage that happened. And that rage was something that happened as related to, again, these white Americans having to deal with actually losing for the first time in many of their lives. And because they lost, they wanted to go out here and do some damage. So what happened, again, all starts again with a lot of these white Americans finally realizing that they are actually having to be real people in a real world, and they can't really deal with the fact that in the real world, somebody is going to say no to them and that there's an actual loser. Now, what happened on Wednesday was all of those people who were, again, simmering and boiling in anger, they decided to pretend to have a protest, but then that protest escalated into an insurrection. And that insurrection really showed us how damaged our country is by white supremacy. And it showed us how nothing has changed in the country over the last 50 years since the civil rights movement. Now, according to many as related to the civil rights movement, things were supposed to have changed with these racists, but most of Black America, we already know, nothing has changed as related to these racists. So these racists decided that since their candidate didn't win and was about to wind up losing the presidency, they decided to go out here and try to stop that ratification. And they decided to stop that ratification by storming the Capitol building. Now, when they stormed this Capitol building, we again saw how deep the racism is in this country and how hypocritical this country is, because the people who were a part of Black Lives Matter, and I don't support their agenda, they went out here to protest the murder of George Floyd. But what was interesting was we had the National Guard out here to protect the Capitol. We had many of these Capitol Police on hand, and we had a whole group of Secret Service and FBI out here to protect the property as related to Black Lives Matter and protect the Congress as related to Black Lives Matter. But there was no one there to protect anybody as related to this whole insurrection that these terrorists were participating in. And that's a glaring hypocritical thing as related to the whole situation. You can have an entire army out here to defend against Black protesters, but when white males and white females go out here to riot and participate in an insurrection, you practically have no one guarding the gates. In fact, you have somebody actually opening the gates for the protesters, and this is shown to people on video that was broadcast all over the world. We had people who were working for the Capitol Police opening the gates to let these insurrectionists and terrorists in to go here and terrorize the Congress and the Senate, because that's what that really was. It was an act of terrorism. This the whole reason why those people stormed the Capitol building was not to protest. No, they wanted to send a message to those people in the House and the Senate, the same way the Ku Klux Klan would send messages to Black people by burning their businesses, burning their homes, and lynching Black people. This was the same type of terrorism that was perpetrated inside of the Capitol building. This is what they were doing there, was sending a message to the Congress as related to, if you ratify this election, we're going to come after you. And this was not about any sort of protest. This was about sending a message to the House and the Senate that we can get you. That is what these politicians wanted to do. Not politicians, but these terrorists wanted to do. They wanted to send a message to these politicians that they can get them. And again, if you look at what happened with Gretchen Whitmer at the State House in Michigan, that was, again, as I see it, a major indicator to the precursor of what was going to happen later on. I mean, if you look at what happened with Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan and a mayor in Kansas who was threatened with death when she approved a law to mandate mask wearing, we can see that these people, they are not really about freedom. They are about terrorizing people, and they are about imposing their will on the American people. As we can see that this is not about challenging things in court like the church tried to do as related to some of these COVID restrictions and some business owners are trying to do. They're trying to work within the legal system to preserve Americans' rights under the Constitution. But these individuals, they are about going out here and starting to use violence to be able to go and participate in their whole behavior. Thank you, Omar Abdul Malik, for the super chat. I greatly appreciate it. But I'm going to continue to go on. Again, if you want to donate to the super chat, you can do so. And if you want to go out here and, again, donate to the Cash App, it would also be greatly appreciated, because that's how I stay on the air, and that's how I pay the bills for the internet. So if you want to donate to the Cash App, it'd be greatly appreciated. And you can also donate via PayPal too. But the whole thing with this is these individuals, they were about, again, terrorizing these politicians. And we started, again, to see this escalation with that mayor in Kansas. And a lot of this is happening because we have groups of people in America who believe they have nothing to lose. And again, I talked about this in a previous video. Thank you, Born Saver, for the super chat. Greatly appreciated. I talked about this as related to these people who have nothing to lose and how they can become extremely dangerous, because when a person believes they have nothing to lose, they are willing to, you don't know what they're capable of doing. And these individuals, they felt like they had nothing to lose because the president, who they thought was going to make their lives great again, was going to be out of office, and they saw a majority at the House and the Senate going towards these left candidates. So many of these people who are on the far right, they believe they have nothing to lose, and that's why they stormed the Capitol building. And they stormed it again not as an insurrection and an act of terrorism. And people just need to stop calling it a protest, because this was an act of terrorism. It's just like what happened with the Ku Klux Klan in Black communities. And it was, again, about sending a message, because anybody who has studied the Ku Klux Klan and understands the terrorism they participated in, again, it was all about instilling fear in people. It was about instilling fear in Black people not to apply for a white man's job. It was about instilling fear in Black people not to vote for certain candidates. It was about instilling fear in Black people for not going out here and owning a better car or wearing better clothes. It was about instilling fear that you need to know your place in our society. And what they wanted to do with that whole attack on the Capitol was instill fear in the people on the left that they need to know their place and they need to know where they stand. And again, there were all sorts of indicators this was going to happen. I mean, I remember when Mr. Superboy warned people, talking about how those Proud Boys, when Donald Trump said in the debate, Proud Boys stand up or something like that. There were indicators telling people what was going to happen, but I saw those indicators coming 8 years ago, because all of these dominoes started to fall with George Zimmerman. And when we gave George Zimmerman a pass, they gave white supremacy the go-ahead, because if you don't set boundaries with a white supremacist from day one, he then takes that effort to continue pushing his hatred in the country. And that's something people really don't understand about racism and white supremacy. When you give a white supremacist an inch, he starts to take miles. And that's what led to the rise of Donald Trump, was the fact that many on the left took Donald Trump for granted. They thought he was an easy to beat candidate, and they really did not really listen to what was going on with the American people, who had been suffering with the Great Recession, and they didn't really understand that these terrorist organizations were building momentum, and they were building momentum all across the country. I mean, these terrorist organizations, these white supremacists, these white nationalists, they have been building momentum for over a decade, and they've been building momentum on many of these social media platforms for years. While they spend their time talking about flagging Black channels and taking Black channels down and watching Black channels, meanwhile, many of these white supremacists and white nationalists, they have been on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook for years, and they have never had their channels taken down. They've never been flagged. They've never been banned, and many of them are still on the air. And in fact, they use social media to actually go out here and establish their protest, and they use social media to continue building their campaigns. And while they were watching Black people who only were talking about building Black-owned businesses, in working, shopping at black-owned businesses, building group economics, and working towards tangibles. They were so busy watching black people that they didn't pay attention to these white nationalists. And these white nationalists, they were sitting there planning these acts of terror for years. And they sat there and they would talk about these acts of terror on their platforms. They would sit there and talk about them and their conspiracy theories for years. And the sad part is, most people don't, they're still looking at black people, but they're not looking at these people, and they're not really listening to those people, because when I was watching the video of many of these white supremacists that was broadcast on national TV, many of them were saying that when they stormed the Capitol on Wednesday, that was just the first strike. And again, it's very similar to what happened with the Ku Klux Klan and black people when they would go out here and burn somebody's house down or burn a cross in front of it. That would be the first message to instill fear in people. And many of these, again, people who were part of that mob, they were saying they were coming back. And that's the whole thing that should really get people scared, get people to understand the gravity of the situation. Because I'm not going to say get scared of it, but you have to understand the gravity of it. When they said they'd be back, you need to take that very seriously, because these people are not finished with things as they see it. Because again, these people believe they have nothing to lose. And I sat there and I listened to them talk about how they're going to come back with weapons. And that video is on Facebook right now. They're sitting there talking about they're coming back with weapons. And most of these people in mainstream media, they're just dismissing it as a small group, but they don't understand, again, the gravity of how dangerous this group of beta white males and beta white females go out here. These people believe they have nothing to lose. What's going on, G-Boot 2786? Glad to see you here. Talking about this chaos at the Capitol. And these people, they feel like they have absolutely nothing to lose, because a lot of these people have lost their businesses. A lot of these people have lost their jobs. They're in a financial bind, and some of them do have jobs, but again, they feel like they're losing their rights and their privileges. And they feel like when they hear guys like Joe Biden talk about immigrants first, these are people who, again, they're angry because white supremacy was supposed to guarantee them a certain lifestyle. White supremacy was supposed to guarantee them a certain social status. And many of these people, they are extremely angry. And this is something that, again, many on the right and the left don't understand. They don't understand that these white supremacists, they're sitting there going, they're going to fight to, as they believe it, take back their country, because they believe that they have nothing to lose. And some of these people, they would rather go out here and fight, because a lot of them have these delusions, as they've been sitting there reading books like the Turner Diaries and many of these other white nationalist books. They're going to fight for their country to the end. And many of these people, they are extremely dangerous. And many people, they're sitting there thinking, oh, this is not anything. But I look at the big picture and I understand that these white supremacists, they are, as they see it, locked in a war. So for them, they saw that first salvo in that terrorist campaign as the first salvo for them. And this isn't over by a long shot. If anybody thinks it's over by a long shot, they're completely mistaken, because you have a lot of people out here, they're extremely delusional about things. You have people who are thinking, oh, we got rid of President Trump on Twitter to keep him from inciting things. But these people have their own social media. I mean, they have their Gab, they have their Minds, they have their other video platforms. I mean, they have their own, what they call alt tech, where they have their own social media and they are on their own platforms, and That you can knock them off the popular platforms like YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, but they've got their Stormfront, they've got their Gab, they've got many of their own platforms, they got their parlors, they have their own platforms where they will continue to go on pushing their agenda. And that's something that many, especially in big tech and the left, don't really understand, is that these people, they have their own thing, and they when you decide to censor them off one platform, they just migrate to another. So going out here and getting rid of them on one platform doesn't really get rid of them overall. Their message is still out there, and their message is gonna be out there as long as we have First Amendment, people right to free speech, and that's meant to protect speech we don't like, and it's meant so that we can have counter arguments to refute the arguments of people like these white supremacists and these white nationalists out here. These people, they really are, again, a danger to everyone, because they're, again, not about protecting the Constitution, because when these people stormed the Capitol building, it was not about protecting the Constitution. It was not about protecting the rights of American citizens. It was about, again, sending a message to the Congress and the Senate that if you don't go out here and interpret the law the way we want, the white supremacist way, then we are going to go and take over the country. So a lot of people think that this is just Donald Trump, but no, this has been bigger than Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump was the catalyst for a lot of this, but all that wouldn't have started unless we had done something about George Zimmerman. So when you really look at the big picture, everything started with George Zimmerman, because had we done something about George Zimmerman, there would be no momentum for these racists to build their platform and their agenda on, and there would be no platform for Donald Trump to stand on. So when you look at the racism from the big picture, the racists on the left thought they could take the George Zimmerman case for granted. They could deny Trayvon Martin justice, but what they didn't understand was they were putting a seed in the ground, and now you are reaping what you sowed. Later than you sow, greater than you sow. And I take that phrase from Pastor Charles Stanley, because he presented the truth in that statement, because America is reaping more than it sowed as related to the murder of Trayvon Martin, greater than it sowed with the murder of Trayvon Martin, and by denying Trayvon Martin justice. And now we are reaping a bitter harvest, because these beta white male children of the corn, who have been growing up like stalks for over 50 years and even 60 years, many of these white male and white female children of the corn, now they are participating in the same types of violence that they oftentimes try to call Black people out for. Many of these children of the corn, they sit there and talk about how Black people are savages, how Black people are animals. But when we look at the behavior in the Capitol building, we see that the same people who call Black people animals and savages, we see them participating in that behavior. And what we see in that is that they were actually projecting on to Black people their own feelings about themselves, because what I heard from many reports was, in addition to tearing up the Capitol building, we also saw them smearing feces on the wall, and we saw them climbing the wall like a bunch of animals. So they would sit there and talk about, oh, Black people are, again, savage and violent, but here we have a whole group of white males and white females participating in behavior that is just as feral as the children of the corn that I talked about in my classic video, Black Children of the Corn. And what we're seeing again is this bitter harvest we have reaped as related to 10 years of not doing anything about George Zimmerman and 50 years of feminism in the white community, because the white community was also damaged by feminism because it changed the family dynamic through no-fault divorces and single motherhood, and it also made the family fall apart because the male there was also emasculated as well. So we started to see, again, a perfect storm build up, and now we're starting to see that bitter harvest as related to these white male and white female children of the corn. And these children of the corn have grown up and they've laid siege in Washington, again, sending us a powerful message about what's happened with our country, because this whole incident shows us how much our country has declined, and it's shown us how everything as related to standards in our country has really declined. I mean, people are not really understanding, again, the gravity of how bad things are. And I think they're thinking that your Joe Biden is going to come in and be some sort of savior. And they've got this Joe Biden up like he's Saint Biden. He's going to come in and make everything better. But again, I don't think he really understands how divided the American people are. And he doesn't understand how many American people have been pushed practically to the edge as a result of the failed flatten the curve theory of the COVID-19 pandemic. Because that's when we started to see an already tense situation with the country really start to deteriorate, because then when we did that flatten the curve theory and closed the non-essential businesses, that's when we really started to see America really start towards a rapid deterioration, because instead of us really taking a minute to look at the needs of the people, we had politicians who were disconnected from the people, and they didn't really understand that more and more of these people were on the edge, and more of these people were having nothing to lose. And these white supremacists, and again, white nationalists, seeing that people had nothing to lose, they saw an opportunity to try to take power. And that's what we saw in the Capitol building in Washington. In addition to them sending that message, is that they were making plans to take power. They see the government as weak. They see government leadership as weak because they're not listening to we the people, and they're not really concerned about the needs of we the people. So because they're not really listening to their constituents and not taking care of their needs, what's happening is more and more of those people are becoming disenfranchised, and they're listening to rhetoric on social media, on these platforms like Stormfront, on these platforms like your Gabs, like your other platforms like Parler. They're sitting there listening to these platforms, and many people think, oh, we can shut down one, but they'll just open up another because the internet is fluid, and there is no way of stopping these guys. I mean, these guys can open up Reddit, they can open up an easy board, and they talk in code. So there's no real stopping them, because many of these people, again, they feel disenfranchised. They feel like they have nothing, again, that is going to give them any skin in the game. I mean, they want their white privilege, but the great irony is they were allowed to have their white privilege when you really think about it, because no group of black people would ever be able to storm that Capitol building. The official policy for anybody who breaches the Capitol building and breaks past security is to shoot to kill. And that's the official policy as related to the Capitol building, because they want to protect all of those senators and representatives. But these white males and white females felt they could go here and storm that Capitol building. And they were actually helped to do that by members of the Capitol Police. And the fact that the National Guard was not deployed, the fact that the FBI wasn't there, no, they had support on the inside that allowed them to actually participate in that insurrection. They had support on the inside that enabled them to go into that Capitol building. And this is something that flies over the heads of most of the American people. They're sitting there thinking that this is, again, a small group of angry people, but they don't understand this. It just shows you how deeply, intricately woven these white supremacists are woven into our government system. I mean, many of these, as like Tariq Nasheed talked about, as related to race soldiers, many of these people are a part of our police. They are a part of our FBI. They are a part of our what they call them, the Capitol Police. They are a part of your Secret Service. They are even a part of your military. And that's why Tariq called them race soldiers, because they have infiltrated all parts of our law enforcement, and they've gotten this tactical training similar to what your Kyle Rittenhouse had when he shot those 3 protesters in Kenosha. These individuals, they are heavily armed, heavily trained, and they are inside the system, and they know how to work the system on the inside. And this was all part of their plan, again, to send a message to all of those politicians on the left and the right that if you don't do things our way, we're going to deal with you. And again, you can look at it as them reaping what they sowed, because this was the same type of terrorism that was enacted on Black people back in the days of Jim Crow. This is the type of terrorism the Ku Klux Klan participated in during the days of Jim Crow. And this is what they did. They would go out here and send a message to Black people. Don't vote for that guy. Don't apply for that job. Don't buy that car, or don't wear that suit. We are sending you a message that if you don't do things our way, we are going to punish you, and you're going to be punished severely. So that's the message that was sent out there. And these guys not only sent that message, they said they'd be back to do more. And this was said by several people at that whole breach. They said they would be back with weapons. And that should be the thing that really you should really think about, because for these white supremacists, this isn't over. This is just starting for them, because they see an opportunity to take the country in their eyes, and they see an opportunity to do this. Now, some people would say they're delusional, and I would have to agree with guys like Professor Black Truth that they are delusional, because again, a coup can't work without a military. But this is what we're seeing is, as I see it, the start of American terrorism. And this is where we really saw the start of American terrorism with Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing. But this is all, again, fitting right in line with that pattern and profile I talked about in my book, The Man Crisis. I mean, we have a bumper crop of beta white males, and these beta white males are out here. They're frustrated, they're angry, and they see their smooth world being made more rough. And that's making more and more of these white males angry and wanting to go out here and explode in rage. And what we saw was, as I see it, the lighter side of the spectrum of violent behaviors so far. I mean, when you really look at the big picture as related to that whole terrorist insurrection and at the Capitol building, that's the lighter side as related to the spectrum of violent behaviors that these betas are going to participate in. And it's only going to get worse from here. So when I look at the big picture as related to these individuals, they're just getting started because in their eyes they feel like they have nothing to lose, and most people don't understand how many millions of these individuals are out here, and they are practically everywhere. I mean, just they are not, these people are not just some random white nationalist that you see, like that guy who was all dressed in that white, had that face paint on and was wearing those tattoos. No, these guys are all throughout our society, and they are your police officers, they are your EMTs, they are your mailman, they are running local fast food restaurants. I mean, these people are all around us, and that is one of the most terrifying aspects about these white supremacists is they are all around us, and many of these people, especially on the left, don't understand how dangerous this situation is, and they don't understand how fragmented the country is, and how you've got these people, again, they are angry, they are incensed, and they see this as, again, a war for America. They see this as a campaign to wage war in America. And this is something most people really aren't thinking about. They're just thinking, oh, it's just a handful of individuals who stormed the Capitol building. But there were many more in the background. And the ones who are more dangerous are the ones who are in the far background. And this is something that most people really aren't thinking about, because you have a lot of people in the background who actually support these kinds of people, support their behavior, and think that they're justified in their behavior. And this is something most people, they're sitting there thinking it's just a handful of people, but no, this country is deeply divided. And I saw these divides, coming up when I started to see these lockdowns. And I said, I'm listening to the chatter on social media, and it's sounding like these guys are sounding like civil war. I mean, when I studied the Civil War, I understood that what led to that happening was basically a lot of stuff as related to economics. And when you have half the country unemployed and you have people out of work, it starts to make those more and more people want to support these types of people and these types of agendas, because they feel like they have nothing to lose. And when they see an apathetic government not really listening to we the people and taking 3 and 4 months off instead of trying to get people help, they start to think that the other side is right. And a lot of people, they were angry and frustrated because they saw that they weren't getting their needs met by their government. They elect these representatives, but these representatives don't represent their best interests. In fact, these representatives have practically abandoned them and left them to suffer for months on end. And again, creating more and more fire as related to their fuel. And we saw that go on. And again, these white supremacists, they're capitalizing on all these opportunities. And most people are sitting there thinking, oh, it's just a handful of individuals. But there were millions of people, again, at that protest. And if only a handful stormed the building, that's nothing compared to those who were further outside. And again, many said they would be back. And that should be something that people really think about, because if they're saying they're going to be back, you really need to take that seriously, because these are individuals who basically are sitting there thinking about they're going to do more damage. And again, what we saw was just the light side of the spectrum of violent behaviors these beta males are capable of. And if they're saying they're coming back with weapons, that's not a joke, and that's something you really need to take seriously. But I look at this whole situation as related to what went on. And again, this has been building for years. This has been simmering and boiling for years. And many of these people, they're taking not taking it as seriously as I think they should take it, because when I look at everything as related to this country, we are really as I call it, on the brink. And I talked about that in my classic video, on the brink. And I don't think many of your politicians understand the gravity of the situation, because many of them are not really abstract thinkers. Many of them are not critical thinkers. They think that they've got time, but they don't really have as much time as they think they have. And many of these white males out here, we've again raised a bumper crop of betas, and this bumper crop of betas, they see their world getting more and more rough. And when they see their world becoming more and more rough, and they can't have that white privilege that their fathers had, where they had this lifestyle where they could go out here and live off 97% of black dollars and 97% of everybody else's dollars, and they have to actually live within their means. This is what's got many of these insecure white males about to lose it. And when they hear guys like Joe Biden talking about making others get priority over the white male, that's also got them upset. But again, this is the great irony, is they can't really see how much privilege they had, because again, if a group of black protesters went to even approach the Capitol building, they would have been shot on sight by Capitol Police. I mean, I remember somebody told me about an incident where black woman was driving a car, and she was shot for just driving near the Capitol. I mean, that's what happens to black people. And if you really think about it, what happened with the Black Lives Matter protesters? Now, I don't agree with the Black Lives Matter protesters. They were cleared out of the square so Donald Trump could have a photo op. And the great irony of that was that I said way back that was going to be the end of Donald Trump. And I believe that was the end of Donald Trump overall, because that was the moment where he put his vanity over the needs of we the people. And that's what put the nail in the coffin for the Trump presidency. Because once he decided to go have that clear those people out, have the National Guard clear those people out, and have the photo op in front of the church, I believe that was the jump the shark moment for your Donald Trump and his reality show of a presidency. I believe that was the end for him as a credible candidate. And that was the thing that practically put the end to his political careers. That one incident right there. And after that, we started to see a complete decline as related to the Trump presidency. So I look at that incident and I started to see, again, the jump the shark moment for your Donald Trump, where he practically made a decision that took his whole campaign downhill, because people, they were with him as related to voting until I think that point. I mean, at the beginning of the year, I thought he was going to landslide like Ronald Reagan in '84, but everything deteriorated after that. And thank you for the Cash App. I really appreciate it. Ken, thank you for the Cash App. Really appreciate it. But that was the jump the shark moment for Donald Trump, and he couldn't see it. He thought he could still go on, but that was the moment where his entire campaign practically fell apart, and he didn't really see it. Now, when I look at the whole thing with everything, again, the hypocrisy here with, again, Black Lives Matter and how they were handled and the way these white nationalists were handled, there was again, completely different thing. I mean, the Black Lives Matter people, when they went to protest, we saw a show of force, and that showed, again, the hypocrisy of America's racism towards black people, because we'll sit there and say we need to have a strong militarized force to protect against black people, but when white people come to the Capitol building, basically to participate in an insurrection, we don't see any Capitol Police, we don't see any FBI, we don't see anybody from the Secret Service. I mean, these people are supposed to be out here to protect our representatives, And again, the official policy is if someone breaches the Capitol building, they're supposed to shoot to kill. And again, they can sit there and murder a black woman for just driving the wrong way years ago, but there was nobody there to go after these guys. And again, that shows the entire international community the hypocrisy as related to the way people are still seen in black and white. And it still shows us that nothing has really changed in this country since the days of the civil rights movement. That we are still two worlds, one black and one white. And we are now two worlds, as I see it, where the black is suffering, and the black is suffering due to white supremacist policies that have destroyed the black family and the black economy. But what's really troubling is that that was just a canary in the coal mine, because when you really look at all the things that have happened over the last decade of as related to the Obama presidency's second term and the Trump presidency's one term, we see that what happened to black people was a canary in a coal mine, because all of the things related to George Zimmerman created the domino effect that led to what we saw with these white nationalists and white supremacists storming the Capitol building. Because if they could go out here and violate Trayvon Martin's civil rights, then these same people felt like they were justified in violating the civil rights of all Americans. And these same individuals felt within their rights to go out here and then decide to trample over our Constitution because they felt they had the right to do so. And they were given that right, sadly, by America's first black president and his attorney general, because they were too scared to stand up for America, and they were too scared to stand up and set a boundary for black American civil rights. And because they didn't set a boundary to stand up for black America's civil rights, we have these individuals who believe that they are justified in storming a Capitol building and believe that they are justified in terrorizing your congressmen who represent the people of America, and the Senate who represent the people of America. So many people can't really connect the dots. They think, oh, Trayvon Martin was an isolated incident. What happened to Trayvon Martin was nothing. But when you denied Trayvon Martin his civil rights, you denied the American people their civil rights, and you allowed a group of white racists and white nationalists to build momentum. And once they built that momentum, they started to, one, take the presidency with Donald Trump. And then after they lost the presidency, they decided to storm the Capitol building in an effort to send a message that they now have enough momentum to continue perpetrating their agenda. And now they're going to become a terrorist group that are going to go out here and participate in terrorist acts. So again, I see it also as reaping what they sowed, because when we look at what the U.S. has done in other places, it's reaping what they sowed. And this is a bitter harvest for America. And many people are shocked at what they're seeing. Many people are surprised at what they're seeing. But when I look at Trump's America and I look at the big picture of what people call Donald Trump's America, it holds a very dark mirror in front of the American people. And that dark mirror is something most people don't want to take a look in. But as a black man, I live in the dark side of that America every day, and I see that reality every day. So many people would sit there and be shocked and dismayed. But again, I saw this coming 10 years ago because I live in the real America, which is controlled by white supremacists. And these people this is what they do. When they can't get their way, they participate in violence, they participate in terrorist acts, and they want to be able to force their ideas on people. They really don't care about anyone. All they care about is their agenda, and all they care about is further perpetuating their agenda. And they will destroy anybody who gets in their way. So they don't really care about anyone. And most people, they're just waking up to see the dark reality that Black people have lived in for over hundreds of years. We've lived in this dark reality for hundreds of years. And many of these people out here, they're starting to see that reality, and they can't handle seeing that reality. And many of these whites who are used to all of these privileges, they are hearing no for the first time, and that's opening their eyes to the dark reality of the America that Black people have lived in for 400 years. And that's something they really can't deal with. And that's, again, one of the other things that's going on with a lot of Americans. They can't handle that dark reality as related to the America they were told. A lot of these white racists, they were told, again, that they would have this success, they would have these good jobs, they would be taken care of, but they're finding that the system is not giving them the jobs, the system is not giving them the money, the system is not treating them the way they believe they should be treated. They're not getting the privileges that their fathers and grandfathers had. And that's got a lot of these white folks angry, and it's got a lot of them upset. So they are really they're really about, again, they are at that place of nothing to lose because they feel like they have nothing to lose because they're not getting what they want. And this is something many people really aren't thinking about as related to what went on in Washington. But what we saw there, again, was something that had been culminating for years. And sadly, many of your politicians, they just keep focusing on Donald Trump because they're obsessed with Donald Trump. And that's something I also talked about in a classic video called The Trump Obsession, because everybody thinks that if they get rid of Donald Trump, the problem will go away. If they get rid of Donald Trump, it will just end. But it's not going to end with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump, while he is a popular guy, he's just a front man to be, as like Brother Tennessee said, a scapegoat. But these feelings are there. They have been there for years. And many white Americans have these feelings, and there's no real healing that divide, because these people want their privilege, they want their advantage, and they see the world that they had falling apart, and they want to try to preserve their world. And while Trump may be gone, that he's the least of anybody's worries, because these people are bigger than Donald Trump. I mean, white supremacy, when you really look at it, white supremacy is a religion, and it's a religion that many people all over the world believe. So I once watched a video, there were Japanese people in Japan for Trump, and again, that shows you how deep white supremacy goes. And these white supremacist beliefs, again, they are a religion, and what many people don't understand is it's a religion that actually superimposed itself over the Bible, and it became the actual belief of the world. A lot of people think, oh, I'm following Christian church, but they're actually following white supremacy because they're not really reading the Bible and reading the parts where Jesus said that there's no difference between Jew and Greek and Scythian, that all are members of the body of Jesus Christ, and that in the other part of the Bible where Jesus, a Palestinian Jew, said when he was talking to the centurion, and the centurion told him, you say go and do it, and he yielded to the Lord. That was a part that shows us that the Most High living God is not a racist, and he loves all people, because he said that people from different lands would be a part of his kingdom. But the white supremacist, he will sit there and talk about how he's a Christian, but he promotes his hatred, and he manipulates the text similar to what the devil does, because the devil can quote scriptures, and the white supremacist, being an agent of the devil, he can quote scriptures as well. And he manipulates things like religion, because religion has nothing to do with the Most High living God. He has nothing, he takes the word of God and manipulates it to fit his agenda. And that's something many people don't really understand. Again, how deeply intricate and how deeply insidious white supremacy is as a religion. And it really is ingrained in the minds of people subconsciously. And the only way you can break that subconscious hold of white supremacy on your mind is if you give your life to the Most High living God, and he puts Jesus' spirit in you, and he opens your eyes to make you see the truth about this white supremacy, this religion that has basically been ingrained in America's culture ever since its inception. I mean, this culture has this religion in it for ever since its inception. And if you think Donald Trump and his supporters storming, not Donald Trump and his supporters, but Donald Trump supporters storming the Capitol building is going to just end with them walking out, you're sadly mistaken, because this goes beyond Donald Trump. This is about white supremacy, and this is about the white supremacist beta male fearing that he's going to lose the power that the devil gave him, and seeing the truth as related to about the lie that he was told by the devil. And that's the thing that's really, again, got a lot of these white supremacists upset, is they can't stand the reality of the truth about white supremacy. They can't understand that this lie is unraveling right before their very eyes, and this whole world system that they lived and believed in is falling apart, because that rose-colored reality that was created by these religious beliefs and these ideas is falling apart, and they can't stand seeing the reality as related to what's truly there. They can't really stand seeing what's there, and that's what's got, again, a lot of them frustrated, a lot of them angry, a lot of them simmering and boiling in anger, and exploding in a rage, because their whole world is falling completely apart. And when they see a man who they deified like Donald Trump, because that's what I see with a lot of people who support Donald Trump, they support this false Christ. He basically has become like the image of white Jesus, and he's become their God, and they're seeing their God fall. And when they see their God fall, that's what has a lot of these people in fervent anger. They're thinking that if their God falls, that it's a bad, that is their world is falling apart for some of these people. But for others, they understand that it's a bigger picture, because white supremacy, again, is a religion, and it's a religion where white people see themselves as God. Now, the Trump supporters see Donald Trump as their God, but the white supremacists who are funding everything see themselves as God. And they see themselves as God, and they see themselves as being right. And because they see themselves as being right, they believe they have every right to step on everybody else's rights in this country. And they believe they have every right to go out here and terrorize people. So when I look at the big picture, again, it's like really showing me that America, again, has not changed in any way, shape, or form since Jim Crow. And we still are participating in the same vicious cycle And we're still two worlds, one black and one white. And in spite of all of these people talking about how America has become so diverse, how things have changed, nothing has really changed because black men like myself still cannot get jobs, and we also can't get equal opportunity. The white supremacist then put his white woman in place to keep black men out of the job market and out of the business market. And he also put black women to be there as a buffer and other minorities. So nothing has really changed in this country. And that reality is manifesting in people who live in the rose-colored world of both the left and the right. They're seeing that the rose-colored ideas they have about this country are crumbling right before their very eyes. And we see that the people on the far right are exploding in a rage. And that's what we saw with them storming the Capitol building and on Wednesday. And we're going to see, as I see it, more of this go on because, as I stated in the Man Crisis, this is going to get worse. And I also stated in the Man Crisis that we might possibly see civil war because when you have a large group of beta males in any civilization, and those beta males cannot have their rose-colored world where everything is smooth for them, that's when those frustrated and angry beta males simmer and boil in anger. Then they eventually explode in a rage. And again, we're seeing the light side of the spectrum of violent behaviors when it comes to these beta males. And we've seen this escalate over time. I mean, we've gone from these mass shootings to people, again, going to state houses to terrorize politicians and make death threats to politicians, to storming the Capitol building. Clearly, the behaviors are escalating as we see it. And again, the man crisis in this country is getting worse. And this is just, as I see it, another incident in the man crisis in some ways. And it's one that is a major indicator to how bad things are getting in this country. And many politicians, they're so busy thinking about their own personal thing, they're disconnected from the people. But when I look at the big picture again, the canary in the coal mine was black people, and nobody paid attention to that canary in the coal mine. And now we're seeing what I see to be us in a really bad situation that only can possibly get worse because there's no real way to heal this like your Joe Biden would propose. Because when you have a nation of people with nothing to lose, a nation of people with nothing to lose, there's no telling what they're capable of. And sadly, we saw 5 people lose their lives, and at that whole Capitol building act of terrorism. And sadly, I fear that if we don't really acknowledge how dangerous things are, more people might lose their lives. Because again, America is on the brink. America is in a really bad place. And we really need a spiritual intervention from the Most High, as I see it, to stave off what I think is going to be a really, really rough year, because we're only seeing, as I see it, the tip of the iceberg as related to things. Because when you have, again, half the country out of work, half the country with nothing to lose, and half the country feeling like it's not getting what it wants out of the American dream and not getting its ability to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we have a divided country. And I don't think it's going to be an easy road towards bringing that country back together, because we're really in a really bad place. And again, most people, they don't understand that the people on the right and their anger is bigger than Donald Trump, and they're looking to push their agenda further. And they were, again, allowed to do that due to many of the racists on the left who gave George Zimmerman a pass. And many people will never, ever see how George Zimmerman was the catalyst for all of this. They will just sit there and think, oh, Donald Trump just rose to power out of nowhere. But no, everything ties back to the murder of Trayvon Martin. Had we done something about George Zimmerman, there would be no rise of the far right. There would be no rise of Donald Trump, and there would be no push on the boundaries, because we would have set the boundary for the racist, white supremacists, and the white nationalists and let them know where the line was in the sand. And had we established that line in the sand back then, we would not have the problems we have right now. I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream. And before I wrap up tonight's stream, I want everybody to head over to Amazon.com to pick up some of my books. You can pick them up on a few days. In the chat, I might stay. If you have any questions, I might answer some questions. But you can pick up some of my books, like Greenstein, Blast from the Past, which is available on Amazon.com right now. You can get this book on Amazon, and this is a follow-up to my book, Greenstein, The Sands of Time. This one has a fun bonus in it. This one has a thank you, Nightingale Winston Nightingale, for being here and moderating everything. You did a great job, fantastic job of moderating everything. After three live streams fell apart. But this one has a bonus comic, No Good Deed. I'm getting ready to do my first full comic book, so this is a set bonus story, and it's a sneak preview of what I'm going to feature in the comic. So you can get that book on Amazon.com. And I also have ISIS, the main event, which is also available on Amazon. And this one, The Goddess Next Door, steps inside of a steel cage. And this is the latest book in the ISIS series. Revenge of the Cyber Goddess is going to be coming in April. So that one, you saw the preview cover up. This is the book before it. And I left the link for that one in the chat, so you can get this book available on Amazon. And you can also get John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose. That's also available in paperback and Kindle format. It's also available on Smashwords, the High Bookstore, and Play. It's an action-packed story that you can pick up on Amazon. So pick that one up too. I also have Eternal Night, the vampire novel that people seem to love. You can get this book on Amazon.com as well. So that's some of the books that I have on the SJS Direct imprint. And again, each book that you buy helps me to further be able to produce more positive Black fiction. And it also helps me to be able to further be able to build the SJS Direct imprint and be able to hire Black artists like Mike Williams and be able to keep a lot of comic artists like Bill Walker working. So I really would appreciate that support. And I want to thank people who donated to the Super Chats, the Patreon, the PayPal, and the Cash App, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be able to put great covers like the Revenge of the Cyber Goddess cover on the books. And if it wasn't for your support, I wouldn't be able to, again, remain on the air. So all of your donations really help keep me on the air and keep me talking about content. A lot of people wanted me to talk about this topic, and your donations enable me to do that. So every donation you donate to the Cash App or to the Patreon really helps. Right now, the Patreon is really struggling. We're at $100 a month, and I really want to try to get the Patreon further up. So each monthly donation, again, helps me to be able to do things like pay for book covers and be able to pay for marketing and pay for extras. Like I have a fun extra coming up That's going to be available to patrons first. And all of that is with your support. Again, every dollar that you use, I put back into everything. And again, I want to thank everybody for their support, and I'm asking everybody to donate to the Cash App or the Patreon or the PayPal, because again, it helps me stay on the air and it helps me be able to put more great content out there. So I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream, and I hope you'll be there for next week's stream. I'm going to go edit some more scripts because I got a John Hayes book I'm working on. So I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream, and I hope you'll be there again for next week's stream.